Hello and welcome to the day ahead. It is Monday, November the 3rd. I'm Andrew Gagan. Well, the local market is set to open marginally lower this morning with ASX futures off by around 5 points. Global stocks rounded out their third straight week of gains on Friday, rising for 7 consecutive months. Investors were buoyed by quarterly earnings results on Friday, while the US dollar climbed after hawkish comments from some Fed Reserve members. For the month, the S&P 500 was up 2.25%, the Nasdaq rose 4.7%, and the Dow was up 2.5% for the month. Amazon shares rallied on Friday to an all-time high following its forecast for quarterly sales above estimates. That boosted the consumer discretionary sector, which closed up 4%. Apple shares fell after it forecasts for iPhone holiday quarter sales surpassed Wall Street expectations. However, Chief Executive Tim Cook flagged supply constraints. Netflix rose after it unveiled plans for a 10-for-1 stock split. Warner Brothers Discovery jumped following a report that Netflix was actively exploring a bid for the company's studio and streaming business. Western Digital shares surged to an all-time high following its forecast of quarterly earnings above analyst estimates, and shares of solar panel maker First Solar also surged after surpassing expectations for third quarter sales. Colgate-Palmolive cut its annual sales forecast amid rising economic uncertainty. ExxonMobil beat annual estimates for third quarter earnings underpinned by higher oil and gas production in Guyana and the Permian Basin. And Chevron also beat estimates on record oil and gas production, boosted by its $55 billion acquisition of Hess and stronger refining margins. Well, parts of the US economy, particularly housing, may already be in recession because of high interest rates. That's the view of US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who has repeated his call for the Federal Reserve to accelerate interest rate cuts, saying, "I think that we are in good shape, but I think that there are sectors of the economy that are in recession." This is at odds with some Fed members, such as Jeffrey Schmid, who voted against a rate cut. He said, "By my assessment, the labour market is largely in balance, the economy shows continued momentum, and inflation remains too high." While fellow Fed member Larry Logan said, "I find it difficult to cut rates again in December unless there is clear evidence that inflation will fall faster than expected or that the labour market will cool more rapidly." Meanwhile, Chinese President Xi Jinping has proposed establishing a global body to govern artificial intelligence and position China as an alternative to the United States on trade cooperation. Speaking at the APEC summit, he said a World Artificial Intelligence Cooperation Organisation could set governance rules and boost cooperation. Well, the US 2-year Treasury yield fell to around 3.57%. The 10-year fell to 4.08%. Markets pricing in a 60% chance the Fed will cut rates by 25 basis points at its December meeting. Australian 3-year government bond yields are around 3.63%, with markets pricing in just a 5% chance the RBA cash rate will be cut by 25 basis points at tomorrow's meeting. The US dollar index rose on Friday. The Aussie dollar is currently trading at 65.4 US cents. OPEC Plus has agreed to a small oil output increase for December and a pause in increases in the first quarter of next year, moderating plans to regain market share due to rising fears of a supply glut. Oil prices settled slightly higher on Friday following reports that US airstrikes on Venezuela were imminent, but then retreated after President Trump denied he was planning an attack. Brent crude futures at $65 a barrel. Copper was off slightly. Iron ore fell around 1/3% to $106 a tonne, and gold fell on Friday, weighed down by further uncertainty over US rate cuts. Spot gold is close to $4,000 an ounce. And Bitcoin is at around $110,000, registering its first October loss in 7 years. Locally this week, today we get building approvals for September, as well as the Melbourne Institute inflation gauge and ANZ's job ads. Tomorrow, the RBA reveals its interest rate decision. On Thursday, we get the international trade figures for September. And overseas, the US ISM manufacturing index is released tonight. Tuesday, the US international trade balance, as well as job openings and factory orders. Wednesday, the ADP employment numbers. Thursday, the Bank of England makes its interest rate decision. Friday sees China's international trade balance, and US non-farm payroll data is also released. On the data front today, Cotality has revealed that national home values surged 1.1% in October, pushing the annual growth rate to 6.1%. And on the corporate calendar, Westpac is due to provide an earnings update. That is your day ahead. We'll see you again tomorrow.